80% debt or 90% debt? Which one is better? I'm going to try to help you make your own decision. Now, a lot of people are scared of debt because they don't know how to use it properly. So you should educate yourself first, so then you can minimize the risk and maximize the returns. The power of leverage is that you can use other people's money, pay them an interest, and reap absolutely all the returns. Think about leverage as a magnifying glass. If you're a bad investor, you will fail quicker. But if you're a savvy investor, you will win quicker. Now, this is how 80 versus 90% LVR worked out for two of our investors. They bought two similar properties in the same area for $500,000 each. Now, this is relatively common because prices in the same pocket of the same suburb are quite similar. Now, one of them did it with an 80% loan, $100,000 deposit, $50,000 purchasing costs, a negative cash flow of $10,000, and it grew on year one by $70,000. So 70,000 minus 10,000, that is $60,000 return in year one, and $150,000 capital to acquire the property. Now, the second investor bought a very similar property for the same price, but with a 90% loan. $50,000 deposit, $50,000 purchasing cost, and his cash flow was more negative at $14,000. Of course, bigger loan, slightly higher interest, LMI, etc. And of course, same area, same price, the property also grew by $70,000. $70,000 minus $14,000, $56,000. However, he required $100,000 cash instead of $150,000. Now, in absolute terms, investor 1 achieved 7% higher return than investor 2. However, investor 1 required 50% more capital to achieve that extra 7% return. Now, if we look at the returns relative to the invested capital, investor number 1 at 80% LVR achieved a very impressive 40% return on invested capital. But on the other hand, investor 2 with a 90% LVR achieved a much better 56% return on invested capital. He achieved less returns in absolute, but required much less capital to achieve those returns. Therefore, he has now some extra cash that he can use for the next investment and achieve another high return with that. Now, they both achieved great returns, but investor 2 with 90% LVR achieved 40% better returns with a practically identical property, and the only substantial difference was the amount that he borrowed. Now, how to know if you should use equity from one of your properties for your next deposit? Let's say you're paying at 7% interest on that equity that you pulled out from a property. Well, if with that borrowed money, you can make higher returns than what it costs you to borrow that money, then you can profit the difference. If you can make 40% with that money, you can profit the 33% difference. Of course, provided that you can service that loan. So if you can borrow that money and you can get with it higher returns than what it costs you to borrow it, you will want to borrow more. However, if you can't, you might not want to borrow at all.